and welcome to the study of world history. Today's class will be on European footholds in Southeast Asia and India. Question for you government students out there or economic students out there, what is a monopoly? Well, monopoly is control of a resource or an object by one person or one company. Have you played Monopoly? I've played it lots of times. So what you try to do is to gain as many wealthy, products as possible, pieces of land as possible, and then you rent that land out. Well, we can see what happened. We will see what happened as Europeans will come into the Southeast Asian market, as we say in economics, the market now, and rule it for a while. As we study the European footholds in Southeast Asia and India. So, excuse me, today's objectives will be,
let's turn our attention
to explain how the Portuguese and Dutch built empires in the East. And we will describe how Spain controlled the Philippines. And we will analyze how the decline of the Mughal India affected European traders. So, Portugal's empire in the East. And we can see here, all this belongs to Portugal, a small country. They got there first. This is all the stops they had to go through and all the trading posts that they set up in order to monopolize trade in the East, in the Southeast. But how they got there, and we'll look at this. Again, excuse me, I'll point out to you the Moluccas, which is very important for trade because that is what the Europeans crave. They crave this area here, which is all the spices, the Spice Island. They crave over here on the eastern coast of India to get there to as a way station to get to this area right here. From over here in Ceylon, there's a straight direct pass to the wealth of the Moluccas, the spice trade, and also the silk trade also throughout this area. We see here, Bahrain, we see here the Arabian Peninsula here. We see over here in Africa, as far as all the trade routes that Portugal has had monopoly. Spain might be over there in Americas, and we have Portugal here. So, that's enough time spent on that. Continued, we look at Portugal's empire in the East. Alfonso de Albuquerque.
Let's turn our attention
and what do we know about
island within the animal kingdom.
The Spanish? Continued, we look at Portugal's empire in the East. Alfonso de Albuquerque. And what do we know about the Spaniards and the Portuguese? They're smart traders, they're devious, they come in diplomatically first, okay? And then as far as about force if they can, and deceit. This is how they do. We'll see what happened. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Let me go this way here. Again for their empire. So, why am I keep going back? I don't never want to go backwards. Always go forward in your life. Okay? So, we see here that when he came in, he sees the island of Goya in 1510 and the Indian Ocean into the Portuguese lake. He turned it into, as I showed you before, the Indian Ocean that belonged to the Portuguese because of Albuquerque. He set up trading posts throughout the area. He did it by making treaties at first, and then by force and deceit. Albuquerque burned coastal towns and crushed Arab fleets in that sea. He did this by taking control by force. And we will see that this will help him to control this wide area, but it will work against him also. He attacked Aden. He tried to capture this great city, this great port city. Several times he would try to capture it, but he could not capture this city. He took Ormuz and took Malacca, which I just showed you as far as the Malaccan Straits there, entry into this great wealth, this great area, the Spice Islands. And he set up outposts throughout this area. In the 1500s, Portugal ruled the whole spice trade, this whole area, which I showed you several times. Portugal controlled the spice trade between Europe and Asia. I pointed out and circled those areas such as in Africa, such as in the Arabian Peninsula, and we looked at as far as Moluccan Islands. So this is Portugal's domain. This is how they got there. They got there by making treaties. They got there by basically, burning and robbing and killing their way through this great empire that they built. Portugal's empire in the east. And we see a ship, and we see here a priest that would come in. And the impact on this trade, well, despite their sea power, they could not go into China and rule China. It was too small of a country. Portugal was. China had too great of a force. They could not disrupt trade with India. They could not monopolize the trade with India. So although they did have a great impact on this area, then not as much as of an impact because they were always on the fringe of the Asian trade. Asian trade because India would deal with them, but India, they had nothing that India wanted. The same as with China. And then what would happen with the Arabs, then they would bypass the Portuguese ports because they knew that they had already burned and robbed most of their major ports. And so they would either bypass the Dutch or the Portuguese ports and go to their designated ports and trade among themselves. They could not conquer the territory on land, such as I said before, India and China. They could not conquer it. So, let me turn this off, go forward again. But what they did do, they sought permission to trade from India and China. And we know that they went into China and they brought in the missionaries. And the missionaries, the Catholics, the Jesuits came in and they were ingratiated at first because of the new products in which they got. And so at first they did have good trade relationships with China and with India also. But as again, I said before, they had nothing to offer. Intolerance of Portuguese missionaries caused resentment. And this is, as I said before, they went into China. And instead of being diplomatic all the time, then the Catholics got in there and they started burning and destroying the temples. And again, as far as the Pope being the ruler of the world, the Catholics in China, then they were killed and repelled also. And eventually the Portuguese and the Dutch and the Catholics were expelled from China. And so they traded with India also eventually. Some Asian merchants chose to, as I said, bypass the Portuguese-controlled towns. And basically these were the Arabs, the Muslims who had enough with the deceit of the Portuguese and decided to trade among themselves. The rise of the Dutch. And we see here Amsterdam, which is a small city in the north, Netherlands, excuse me, but they had a great sea power. What happened here was that the Catholics on Spain, then they married the noblemen and women of Netherlands, and the Netherlands became Catholic. They also had the Protestants there also, which were the Dutch, and they wanted to have their own trade. So now we have a competition between the Protestants and the Catholics out of the Netherlands, and it's in the form of the Dutch. sailing fleet. Excuse me. These provinces, they won their independence from Spain or from the Netherlands, the rule of the Catholics, and they sought out to gain wealth and sea power, and they had this sea power. The Dutch fleet returned to Amsterdam with great riches, and once they saw these great riches from Asia, the silk that they brought in, the spices, the pepper, the salt, the sugar, the cinnamon, all these spices were bringing in, and the profits were more than 100%. Investors made 100% profit. At one time, the Portuguese had made almost 3,000% profit, but now this is great for them. A burgeoning sea power. And so what they did, they sought out more trade with Southeast Asia. 1500s, the Dutch warships and trading vessels went into the supposedly sea of the Portuguese, this Portuguese sea, and they battled. They went to war with them, and they won. They set up colonies and trading posts around the world, especially in the Southeast, in Southeast Asia. We know now also because of the Americas in New York, specifically in New York, and throughout the northern part of the Americas. They had great wealth because of this. They built, so the Cape Town settlement built to repair and resupply their ships. Remember Cape Town, the Cape of Good Hope? Well, they built that settlement to repair ships and to resupply ships. They took a lesson from the Portuguese as far as in this sea of the Portuguese, whereby they set up trading posts also, and they set those trading posts up not only to trade, but to build and resupply and repair their ships.